Harris, we look at her history. She came up as a prosecutor, an attorney general, into the Senate. She has lived a number of experiences that I think builded someone the kind of character that's going to be necessary in the presidency. We should elect them for the character because we don't know what's going to come up.
You don't know what's going to come up. That's a person who's definitely exercised command positions, life and death. And this wider embrace of Harris by veterans of national security and conservative politics, these individuals, it is exactly what Vice President Harris discussed and tried to highlight before that big audience at the debate.
I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace.
Now, that was just then. The endorsement's now coming in. Early voting is underway. And then, as for the more traditional Democratic support that I mentioned, that New Yorker cover and its endorsement making the rounds today, the magazine explaining that endorsement by calling Harris the sensible, humane, and liberal-minded choice, saying much of this is beyond debate. The Times endorsement notes that Kamala Harris is a contrast to Trump standing alone as a dedicated public servant who's demonstrated care, competence, and an unwavering commitment to the Constitution. Now, Harris is balancing campaigning with governing today. Just as last week, remember, she took time off the campaign trail to meet with Ukraine's leader amidst that war over there. Today, she canceled her campaign events and is addressing the devastation from Hurricane Helene. We can report that across the South, at least 116 people are dead, hundreds more missing. And you can see here just some of the thousands of destroyed homes and businesses that are visible here, the devastation. FEMA briefed the vice president on the rescue and recovery efforts. This photo is courtesy of her office, and she just late today spoke from FEMA headquarters.
And over the past 24 hours, I have spoken with Governor Kemp of Georgia, Governor Cooper of North Carolina, and many local officials. I have shared with them that we will do everything in our power to help communities respond and recover. And I've shared with them that I plan to be on the ground as soon as possible, but as soon as possible without disrupting any emergency response operations, because that must be the highest priority.
The vice president there discussing the priorities and what she learned in the briefing. For his part, Donald Trump visited southern Georgia in response to the storm and has addressed it. He also held rallies in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania over the weekend. Now, while Trump's aides and his Republican allies say there are many issues and policies to be running on, Donald Trump is doubling down on the rhetoric and the insults and conspiracy theories that he has long used as a political and PR kind of ploy to try to hijack political attention via outrage. Now, this is an old playbook. Sometimes what we're seeing over this weekend involves a more extreme version that we shouldn't normalize, but a more extreme version of what is fundamentally the same playbook. And that does present now familiar challenges. And this is true for citizens, for people in politics, for people in the press. When you're faced with this, when do you confront and fact check these kind of claims? And when do you decide, again, as a citizen or whatever role you see yourself, to decline the temptation of outrage driving overreaction to this individual? I can tell you the New York Times reports that Trump's weekend addresses were notably escalating the attacks. They were dark and often rambling. Other outlets fact-checking false claims and lies by Trump about his opponent and about immigrant communities. Trump also openly vowing to abuse government power, something we've reported on many times here, including the evidence of how he's done so in the past, sometimes rising to crimes, sometimes not. He darkly suggested that Kamala Harris should be impeached and prosecuted. So Trump is now, having crossed this next line about Harris, he's now publicly, loudly agitated for the prosecution of every Democratic nominee he's ever faced. The first one, Clinton, who drew more votes in 2016 but did not win the Electoral College. The second one he faced, the current president who beat him handily. Remember, Donald Trump's first impeachment was over his convoluted and failed foreign plot seeking the prosecution of the Bidens in Ukraine, a place that has much bigger problems than Donald Trump's attempted bribery shakedowns. And now, completing this is Harris. And this part of what I mentioned is this tendency he has. It is larger than rhetoric. Donald Trump's plans to wield power in the second term are available for scrutiny. They are more extreme than the first term, with whatever you already think of the first term and know about the first term. And so it goes beyond rhetoric to his attempt to normalize what he would really do. But while I am being careful to mention these things and not treat them as just ignorable or normalized, I'm not playing clips or footage of the lies. One of the reasons that you have to be careful with ever taking Donald Trump live is precisely to review what is worth airing. And what I'm showing you to know about is not something that we think rises to the standards that we are choosing to air it. There are also politically, and this is a political race, signs that what I just referred to is not working anymore for Donald Trump the way it used to. It's possible politically that it helped Trump somehow in that very first time that he tried the move of vowing the prosecution of then Hillary Clinton, his nominee, the Democratic nominee. That was back in 2016. And remember, the Trump attacks also merged with what had been years of talk about both Clinton's legal issues, some real, much of it exaggerated, especially with regard to her. But now we're in the third installment of this. And if it is politically failing, which is a separate point from whether it is valid, acceptable, consistent with democracy or law, but whether it's politically failing, that brings us to how Donald Trump's own allies and other concerned parties in the GOP are knocking this. They don't think this is working. They think just about anything would be better.
I think we should stick to the issues.
I just think the better course to take is to prosecute the case that her policies are destroying the country.
I've said for years that Trump's divisive rhetoric is something that we could do without.
That's just a smattering of the reaction to the most recent. And so we are witnessing something here that is familiar and for some people might be fatiguing. Of course, a lot of important things can be tiring, but also has notes of a different possible outcome. Again, that always depends on everybody, you watching or listening to this, everyone else in the country who has a role to play. But it does have signs of something different. There is not a complete meltdown overreaction to every single thing he says or lies about, nor should there be. That's a journalistic assessment. And there is more of a concern creeping, growing in public among the people who still want Republicans to win in 36 days that this might not be it. Now, what about those very close swing state polls? What about where we're headed? What about the latest numbers? Well, as we get this close, just a little over a month out from the race, we are going to start bringing you our expert at the big board. You know what it is. You know what he's probably wearing. And you know what he has a handle on. All the numbers, Kornacki, when we're back in 90 seconds.
The quality of your health care shouldn't depend on where you live, what you do, or whether you have insurance. It should be personalized to your unique needs. That's why we created Weight Loss by Hims. 100% online access to GLP-1 injections for as little as $199 per month, including options compounded in the USA and available now if prescribed. With a range of treatments developed with leading weight management specialists, your plan can be customized to you. Expert care and ongoing support. That's healthcare as it should be. Get started at hims.com.
Meet Avocado's best-selling green mattress. Made with certified organic cotton, wool, and latex. Plus pocketed coils to support your body's natural curves for cool and restorative sleep. Featuring a 1-year in-home sleep trial. Complete your bedroom oasis with organic pillows and bedding. Shop today with Avocado Green, proud supporter of 1% for the planet.
More than ever, you need clarity. More than ever, trust is everything. More than ever, democracy needs an ally. Facts must win the day, and questions need to be answered. Because more than ever, the work we do will reverberate for generations.
We are still in a margin of error race. It's tied. It's tied right here in Michigan. It's tied in all the battleground states. So it's going to take all of us to build a pathway, many pathways to 270 electoral votes.
How close is it? Well, Kamala Harris's own campaign manager on their own broadcast is saying this is still a toss-up, margin of error race. There's no one better to help explain why than our own Steve Kornacki at the big board. Steve, walk us through why it feels and we're told it's so tight.
Yeah, I mean, we could take a look at it right here. This is the average of all the major national polls that are out there right now. You do see Harris 3 points ahead of Trump in the average, 49-46. But, of course, I think you were mentioning this last segment. Remember, Trump has lost, the popular vote the last two elections. He lost it by 4.5 points to Joe Biden last time around. So this would be tighter. This would be closer to what we saw in 2016 when Trump was able to stitch together just enough states in the Electoral College to get elected. So take a look with that in mind where the 7 core battleground states stand right now. Again, looking at averages of all the major polls in those states right now, you do see Trump ahead. Again, these are very small numbers. That's the overall story here, but slightly ahead Trump in Arizona. That's a state that went for Joe Biden 4 years ago that Trump carried in 2016. Georgia, Trump by 1.1 on average there. Remember, Trump lost Georgia in 2020 after winning it in 2016. You do see Harris with the advantage in those 3 Rust Belt states, Midwest states, Big Ten states, whatever you want to call them, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Harris with advantages there. All 3 won by Biden last time around, and in Nevada for Harris. And then notably this one in North Carolina, Kamala Harris, I say ahead here. It's 0.2 of 1 point on average. But the significance of North Carolina from an Electoral College standpoint is this. All of these states, except North Carolina, went Democratic. They went for Biden in 2020. Trump is trying to play offense in those states. Anything he wins here are additional electoral votes that he did not get in 2020. North Carolina is the one state here that he did win in 2020. It's the one state where the Democrats are playing offense, and it's got 16 electoral votes. Georgia and North Carolina have the same number of electoral votes. So if this were to be what actually happened on election night, and that's obviously a massive if, but if Trump were to get Georgia, he would pick up 16 electoral votes, which he would then lose by losing North Carolina. One basically wipes out the other if there's a split verdict there. But again, the overall picture you see here, extremely tight in these states. And the question I think that hovers over all of this is we saw polling misses at the state level in 2016 and in 2020. And they were really kind of similar where we saw them and among which group of voters we saw them. Michigan and Wisconsin last time around, the poll misses were significant there. You had sizable mid to high single-digit Biden leads in those states coming into Election Day, and they ended up being razor thin, especially Wisconsin. Wisconsin was just 20,000 votes in 2020. Pennsylvania, some issues there as well in the polling. So if that miss happens again the same way, these become very encouraging numbers for Donald Trump. But we won't know, obviously, till election night if that's happened once again.
Makes sense, Steve, and puts it in context because we hear so much about those states in isolation. You're reminding everyone what the sort of winning coalition was for the Biden-Harris folks last time. You also have a breakdown on a brand new NBC poll of Latino voters. Tell us about that.
Yeah, another major question, I think, hovering over to this election, and one that was sort of posed 4 years ago. Trump lost in 2020, but made gains with Hispanic voters. So a big question has been, would he lock those gains in? And was there any chance he could actually build on those gains? Because that would shake up potentially the electoral map. So here's our poll.